GTK B Mac, what's happening, bro? Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody for joining me on this Friday afternoon live stream. I figured I needed to get one of these in. First and foremost, we got to kind of talk about the last live stream that I did. And if you're here right now, just let me know that I look normal. That was one of the issues with my last live. They got portrait and landscape formats for this particular app that I'm currently using. And for whatever reason, I guess they thought I wanted to stream to one platform in both formats. So that made my last live stream a big mess. I actually just put it on private, but most of what I touched on, I'm gonna touch on here today really quickly. I done had a busy day already. I started the day off with dreaded, preventative maintenance. Had some stuff I had to get done on the truck early. That got completed a lot quicker than what I expected. So I decided I was going to jump on here, kind of touch bases with you guys, let everyone know kind of where Amazon Relay sits this January first quarter. We know it always get interesting. The first quarter of the year, you just see a bunch of different issues, sentiments, things of that nature. So I just wanted to give you guys my perception or my experience, this first week or two of 2026. As we know, Amazon rolled out a bunch of different rules, regulations, requirements pertaining to drivers, trucks, things of that nature. So that's a lot of what I want to touch on today. Like I said, really quickly, I actually have an Amazon Relay run booked pending they don't cancel. Something else that I kind of want to talk about as well. Along with this first quarter, we see a bunch of cancellations, at this time of the year. And when you involve AI and all of these different resources that Amazon tends to use within the Relay app, it's just a recipe for disaster. So I myself, along with a bunch of different operators that I speak with when I'm out, some people I don't even know their name, let me say that first and foremost, but I just see different individuals on a regular basis, and we may have a conversation and I kind of get their experience on, what's going on with Amazon Relay. But across the board, I think all owner operators right now are experiencing a bunch of cancellations here this first quarter. I saw a lot of complaints pertaining to cancellations, during peak season. Me personally, I didn't experience that. But, this beginning of 2026, I've had at least 3 or 4, a couple out of locations where, I frequent and have never or rarely ever had a cancellation. So I see 8 people, I see 10 people right now. A lot of great information for you guys today. Do me a favor and hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. DNC Ventures, what's happening? Detroit in the building. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Yes, sir. Midwest in the building. Appreciate you. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be short and sweet. I just want to run through, a slight recap of peak season and then a lot of the rules and regulations. Like I said, I don't even plan for this to be a full hour. So bear with me. I'm going to get you guys in and out. I know it's Friday. Beautiful day in my market. So I know a lot of people out spending money, a lot of people not in the truck right now. So do with it what you will. But yeah, like I said, I plan to make this short and sweet. Appreciate everybody for joining me. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Be greatly appreciated. See what we got going. I saw 11 people early. I don't know what the likes looking like right now, but hit the like button. Hit the like button. And yeah, the last live I did, it was kind of hard to watch. So it didn't get the viewership that a lot of these Amazon lives get. I kind of talked about that, but I get a bunch of emails, feedback, always positive pertaining to these live streams. Right now, it isn't a whole bunch of information pertaining to Amazon Relay. So, I'm one of the only people doing this right now. So if you're here right now, as I stated, hit the like button. But pertaining to peak season, I'm gonna go through this really quickly. I don't want to be here really long. So like I said, I got a load to pick up, pending it don't cancel, hoping it don't cancel. Who knows? But yeah, I want to run through this really quick. So pertaining to rates, peak season, which kind of started, I want to say 2 days before Black Friday. And it's somewhat still enforced, but for the most part, it has ended. You could find different lows in the nooks and crannies, depending on what your score is. And I want to point out my score right now, I believe, is a 93%. So not perfect by a long shot. And what I'm seeing, what I'm able to book, the rates I'm getting in 2026 have been pretty good from my experiences, what I'm used to seeing. It can get rough, to say the least, this time of year pertaining to rates, volume, and things of that nature. So the beginning of 2026, like I said, with a 93% performance score, I'm not having any trouble booking lows with Amazon. Daytime lows, postal lows, things of that nature. Now, I will say, contrasting from what we saw the end of November throughout December, as opposed to right now pertaining to rates, it is a night and day difference. If you are above like a C plus average, I believe that you are able to negotiate using the AI feature. And if you are able to utilize the AI feature to negotiate different loads, you're probably able to secure loads well over $3 per mile. Now, they do go quick. Other people are always negotiating along with you. AI bases the rates that they throw out off of what other carriers are negotiating as well. So it's kind of a tricky situation. You'll be sitting negotiating a load, and before you know it, it's gone. It's happened to me on plenty of occasions, even here recently. So in negotiations, just be cognizant that other individuals are negotiating as well. If you see AI not wanting to move on a particular load and they're saying, hey, this is the maximum rate that I can put out for this particular run, 9 times out of 10, it's another carrier negotiating as well. And it's affecting what they will or will not pay out. It's also based off of carrier behavior over the course of, say, the last 30 days. Because if an individual is booking a load for $450 on a regular basis, 9 times out of 10, the AI negotiation tool will not negotiate above that. Once that load sits maybe for an extended period of time and a particular carrier that normally runs it is not available, then they'll start to negotiate in upwards of what the regular rate was. So you got to kind of keep that in mind with a lot of these loads. And, with AI involved in all of these apps, it's just a whole different ball game now, as opposed to what we saw years prior. This last year has been just different, to say the least. But, in recent years, before the AI feature, the lows would just sit on the board, increase. The carriers will watch them. Eventually, somebody books them, and That was that. Now you have this AI tool and the load board shuffle, if you will, kind of what I call it, where you have loads put up, they'll sit for a period of time, increase slightly, allow certain carriers to negotiate, and then a load will disappear as if it's been booked, only to reappear 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours later, around the same amount that it was previously negotiated. And it'll allow other carriers to negotiate once again. I think a lot of this plays into the cancellations that we see with a lot of these Amazon loads as well. I know for a fact it does, because when I'm out running some of these Amazon to Amazon loads, I'll show up and it's one load from that particular Amazon to whatever Amazon it was dropping at. But it's 3 trucks on site for the same load. So 3 different times, 9 times out of 10, carriers negotiated and booked this particular load. Issue is, it's not enough volume to support the 3 trucks, oftentimes not even 2. So you'll have 1 truck loaded and 2 trucks experience a cancellation and $175 tow no. And that's happening a lot, especially with the Amazon to Amazon facility loads. 3-4 trucks are showing up for 1 load, sometimes having to wait an hour or 2, only to realize that the load is going to be canceled and they're only going to get the $175 in the tow no payout. Sometimes in unfortunate situations, you'll have individuals that will sit the 2 hours and somebody inside does something wrong in the system when they're canceling the load, and that cancellation actually turns into a rejection. And in a lot of these situations, it then impacts the carrier's performance score, sometimes to where they cannot have it reverse, and they just have to deal with that penalty. But I've heard that a lot. I know I experienced it once. In my situation, I was able to dispute it and have it corrected pretty quickly. But in some instances, you'll show up for a load, they don't have the volume, they intend to cancel, but they accidentally reject. The rejection affects your performance score, and ultimately you have to deal with the consequences. So this is something to watch out for as well. And something I usually tend to live by is, if I'm going to a particular facility and I'm seeing a bunch of cancellations out of that facility, usually, and this is just a little piece of advice from me to you, I'll either try to book, because sometimes they'll come out in tiers where you'll have a load come out at 9, a load come out at 9:30, a load come out at 10. Normally, the later loads tend to pay more. Trick is, those loads are the loads that are more likely to be canceled. So the load with the rate that's paying maybe $3.50 per mile will run. And another carrier may get it for $4.50 per mile. Another guy for $4.34 per mile. But both of those will cancel and essentially turn into $175 tow no, or a cancellation. So this is something to all just kind of keep in your back pocket with a lot of these Amazon relay loads. I see it more with the facility to facility than I do with the DDU postal facility loads. A lot of those nowadays have 5-6 legs. With that many legs, you probably can win pertaining to cancellations, because oftentimes if they cancel a leg, they still leave the payout the same and you're just able to skip the stop. So on that end, it's a win for the carrier because you just pretty much drive less miles for the same rate based off of the original amount of miles. So say you booked a load for 250 miles, your LaSalle stop is not there. So you could skip LaSalle and go straight to Galva. Well, you might save 20, 30, 40 miles not having to go to LaSalle. But at the facility, they're not going to change the rate or the payout. So like I said, in that situation, oftentimes it's a win for the carrier. But when you show up for a load and you think you're going to pull $550, $600, you just got a great rate, $450, $5 per mile, and they cancel that load, quite naturally, the carrier is upset because you would rather run for that $550, $600 than just get $175 for the cancellation. Or worst case scenario, nothing. You see that as well. Sometimes I talked about carriers getting rejections as opposed to cancellations in some of these situations, just depending on how the staff cancels the load. I think they honestly just make mistakes sometimes and they mean to cancel it, but they reject it. Ultimately, it's no way for them to reverse that on site. So it's going to affect the carrier regardless. So that's just something to think about pertaining to a lot of, what's going on with the Amazon to Amazon or Amazon to 3PL or 3PL to Amazon facility loads. Like I said, you really don't have to worry about a lot of that with the DDU postal facilities. And I kind of mix and match. I run a little bit of both. Lately here, I've been tending to run more of the Amazon to Amazon loads because usually it's a pick and a drop. A lot less room for error pertaining to the time requirements and things of that nature. But with the cancellations, like I said, they're more likely to cancel as opposed to the DDU loads. But pertaining to the rates that we saw, throughout November and December, on average, I believe they were like $3 to $5 per mile. A lot of the carriers were easily able to make $800 to $1,200 per day. And I kind of talked about this, but it seemed like with all of the driver, truck, photo regulations and requirements, it wasn't enough supply pertaining to trucks and carriers to fill the demand of volume during this peak season, at least in my market, as well as ATL. I know a lot of individuals did really well throughout peak season, in that market and so forth. Now, it is some markets that just on the regular just are not great markets throughout the year. And peak season oftentimes does not make a huge difference. You ain't gonna always get a miracle pertaining to Amazon and some of these off-brand, out of the way markets. They may have some volume pertaining to relay, but it's not in abundance. So oftentimes the negative feedback that you get pertaining to peak season and Amazon relay, comes from the smaller, out of the way markets where individuals kind of, in my opinion, should expect, less than stellar results pertaining to peak season. I see 10 people right now. If you have not hit the like button, hit the like button for me. A lot of great information in this live stream today. Appreciate everybody for joining me. And like I said, I don't plan to be here too long, but I think we on really good time right now. 12 people If you have not done so, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you. But yeah, I noticed also, and this is every peak season as well. Like I said, to me, peak season, I don't even really get excited about it anymore. It's kind of just business as usual. We see a lot of the same year in, year out. The individuals, the veterans that have been running Amazon for years on end. I mean, it's just business as usual. It ain't nothing to make a big fuss about. So last year, I kind of, went crazy. I kind of overdid it with, the peak season reporting. It was a good year. Last year, this year, I would say was exactly the same or slightly better. I think just because Amazon, implemented all of, and this was strategy, this was strategic. But I feel like Amazon, September, October, November, cleaned house. So once we hit a couple days before Black Friday, along with technicalities, which I kind of talked about, we had inclement weather, different truck issues with different carriers, drivers, suspensions, a bunch of badge suspensions. I'm not going to go into in my market, other markets, a bunch of carriers for no real reason had badges suspended. Admins, owners, the actual companies had to sort these suspensions out. Initially, when I contacted my performance manager, he didn't even know exactly why it occurred. It took him a couple days to kind of do some digging, and he figured it out. But it was a technicality with badges right at the start of peak season. November 25th, November 26th. Like I said, I got caught up in it. I had multiple days where I had to try to figure out what occurred. These situations can get kind of crazy because you just never know, what's going on. And you got to wait the due process, reach out via emails, things of that nature to figure out why you or a driver's badge has been suspended. It also triggers rejections and account performance issues. So it was a big mess right before the holiday. Like I said, I was involved in it as well. It took me about a week to kind of sort it and figure it out. Luckily, with the performance manager that I have, and kudos to him, I think he does a great job. But yeah, he, got it sorted out, and I literally had to go through and apply for a new badge. That's how severe it was. So not only was it suspended, but it took about a week, and I literally had to apply for a new badge and, go through the due process, which took a couple days once the application was put through. I'm just, happy that it got sorted out in a reasonable amount of time. But once again, it was a tricky situation. Initially, I didn't know exactly why it occurred, and it was right at the start of peak season. I was running a load for $600. When I dropped that, I was picking something up for $8. It was going to be like a $1,400 day in about 8 to 10 hours. The $800 load was subsequently rejected due to my badge being suspended. That affected my account. It knocked me from like a 96, 97% down to like a 75%. Immediately, I told you guys I mainly run Amazon to Amazon. That's probably 60% of what I do during the week. All of those were off of the table. So once your performance score drops to a certain level, I believe below a C+, the Amazon loads are removed from your load board, and you get the scraps from the nighttime DDU loads. Now, luckily, during that time, the scraps was looking good. Only issue was I couldn't get the scraps because those facilities that were providing the scraps to the lower level carriers, you needed a badge to get into. So I was just kind of shit out of luck. if you will. But I worked my way through the situation, kind of thought my way through the situation. In these circumstances, you got to kind of just be patient, because you also don't want to overwhelm your performance manager with 18 emails a day. That may not go well. So that's something else I kind of be cognizant of. And I use like an escalation process in order to get stuff resolved. But I also have my performance manager's phone number. Back in the day, you could get that. Now I'm sure he ain't giving out his phone number. With the abundance of carriers, especially in my market, it just ain't a, easy process to get in contact with, your performance manager. But I usually start with an email. A day or two later, I'll follow up. If that doesn't work, a couple of days later, I may shoot a text, or so forth. But yeah, you just got to be patient and wait it out. And for some individuals, it could be nerve wracking, but it's just a due process of sorting out an issue with Amazon. It's nobody that you could immediately just talk to right away other than ROC. And sometimes that may or may not go well. It just kind of depends on the situation. So that's just something to think about if you ever run into an issue with Amazon. What's happening, FTS LLC? Appreciate you. I ain't heard from you in a while. How you feeling? Joliet in the building. What's up, bro? I don't really run Amazon right now, but I was definitely there during peak. I had a lower score and was still able to get that bag. Yes, sir. If you had a working badge during peak season, you could eat. And I kind of talked about this, but when all of those badges were out of whack and everybody's badge was suspended, and like I said, my performance manager, initially, he told me this once he sorted it out. But then once my badge got reenacted, I went into the facility, and I guess I looked like a guy who had just came to the turnstile, but he couldn't get in. And normally the attendant is sitting maybe 10, 15 feet from the gate so they could see you. So when I went the badge in, which I hadn't been to the turnstile, she was like, "Oh, you got your badge reactivated?" I was worried, and I was like, "Oh, no, that wasn't me." And she was like, "Oh, well, it was a guy just here." And she said, "I've just had so many people in the last few days that's come in, and they've had to turn them away because they come to the turnstile, they hit it, and it just beat red. So essentially you can't get in." But, if you had a active badge during the first couple weeks of peak, which would have been the last week of November, first week of December, you were in pretty good shape. Like FTS is saying, even without a perfect performance score, with the volume of lows that were on the board and the amount of time they were sitting, because the lows get posted at maybe 9 p.m. Usually by 1 a.m., everything is booked. And what will end up happening is other stuff will trickle down, rejections, cancellations, maybe that were by mistake, and then they have to repost them. Whatever the case, stuff will trickle down between maybe 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Well, in this particular situation, it was lows throughout the night into the morning. By 9 a.m., everything gone for sure. This particular peak season, it was lows until 5, 6 p.m. in the evening. And then they started being reposted throughout the night. Now, my badge is suspended. I'm wondering what's going on. And little do I know, it's a bunch of other individuals in the same situation as myself. So the lows were sitting because a bunch of carriers or the carriers' regular drivers did not have access. And it was like a ghost town. Just being 100% honest with you, what we saw pertaining to the trucks and the fulfillment centers this peak season, as opposed to the peak seasons of peak seasons past, were like night and day. You saw maybe 10 trucks at the docks, and all of the other dock doors were wide open. All of those other dock doors had freight at them that just had yet to been picked up. And like I said, in peak seasons of peak seasons past, that would not be the case. You got guys lined up along the fence waiting on dock doors. It's filled to capacity, 50, 60 trucks maybe, give or take. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, this peak season, you rolled into the Amazon relay lot and the volume was there. The trucks, weren't. And this was because, like I said, Amazon had previously, a few months before the spike in volume, kind of clean house pertaining to drivers, carriers, trucks that you could or could not use, and things of that nature. So in a nutshell, like I said, you could easily with one truck make 8 to 1,200 per day. And if you were like a veteran and had some type of system to how you were running, 1,500 to $2,000, just all depending on, how many drivers you had, hours of service, things of that nature. But it was plentiful, at the start of peak. Let's see. It was pretty cool with the ship. I was pretty cool with the ship clerk there. Hold on. Something popped up, threw me off track. I was pretty cool with the ship clerk there. You probably know who she is. She used to give me insight on, yeah, and they know everything. That's another thing. Like I was talking to one of my buddies out of Iowa. I wish I had more time today, but it is what it is. But yeah, I was talking to one of my buddies out of Iowa, and he was saying like the ship clerks was telling him, he came in, I don't want to give his lane away. I want to be more careful with that because people depend on these lanes. So, but he run a particular lane. It's very short, about 100 miles. Sometimes he could get that. And it's not even a full 100 miles. It take him an hour and 10 minutes to run it. Because he was trying to put me on it. And he like, man, you could come up out of crib, kick it, and you could eat off of some of these because he can't run them all. But he run about an hour and 10 minutes each way. So maybe 2.5 hours total. And he was getting $700 for that particular lane. It's always up there out of a particular facility. It's a few of them. And yeah, we were kind of talking. And he was saying, the ship clerk was telling him, what he was getting for that particular lane. I'm like, man, that's old news. The ship clerks see everything. So you definitely can't slip nothing by them. But yeah, it's still, and that particular lane is still hot right now. I'm seeing it pop up. It's just like, it just depends on where you position your trucks, how long you're willing to wait, or how long your drivers are willing to wait. I know it's 100% different with drivers. I remember those days, people want to be compensated for their time. So having a driver wait long periods of time while you're on the load board waiting for something to come up or increase, can become costly, to say the least. Also, it'll kind of irritate your drivers. Now you got a pissed off driver operating your truck. You never want that. It's other things that arise once that happens. So smart owner operators try their best. And sometimes this could be nearly impossible, but smart owner operators try their best to kind of work with their drivers and keep them somewhat happy. Once again, I said that's impossible, especially with people, their emotions, feelings, and things of that nature. You also have environments where individuals have to work with other individuals. These individuals may be polar opposites night and day. So a lot of these situations could get tricky. But if you have a driver that's patient, and is able to wait, that'll be beneficial because you'll be able to kind of secure higher rates and things of that nature. But it get tricky with drivers. I don't miss it. This year I'm gonna have to get some help. I kind of came to that conclusion, but yeah, I don't miss dealing with drivers. And I've been in different environments where I'm able to just kind of pick up on and pay attention to different things. And I'm gonna just tell you, in a bunch of situations, you just got certain people that's just not gonna do right. And for whatever reason, these are usually the people that are the most successful. I know it's I know it sounds crazy, but these tend to be the people that are the most successful, within a lot of these companies. So you just got to be careful with who you're hiring, what positions you're putting people in, because like I said, you have certain individuals that's just never gonna do right. And the second they're, out of your, scope, everything go to all hell. So I kind of am cognizant of that. And, all of this, anytime I go into any type of environment, I look at leadership, the people that's running the show, because ultimately that'll tell you what's to come in that particular environment. And that's with any operation. The operation is only going to go as far as the leadership and their mindset and their ability to lead the team to success. It's kind of like a football team. The leadership is the quarterback. If you can't move your team down the field successfully, it's going to be very hard to win. So, like I said, when I go into any of these type of environments, I look at the leadership, what their temperament is, how they move, things of that nature. And that's going to tell you a bunch about the operation as a whole, and also kind of tell you how to approach leadership, drivers, and things of that nature. So it's good to keep educating yourself, because it just get tricky with drivers. What's your take on the asset verification? You still see rentals coming in and out of Amazon. I would say, if I could put it on a scale, maybe 10% of the trucks I see now coming in and out of Amazon are rentals. So if I see 10 trucks coming in, one may be a rental, sometimes none. If that kind of answers your question and gives you a better idea on, what the case is with rentals. But I know with asset verification, because that's part of what's going on as well, you definitely have to be careful with rental trucks, because it's harder to onboard a truck. They want registration, commercial insurance policies, and so forth. You also got to provide, of course, the plate number and things of that nature. But in the past, you could just give a plate number, get a truck onboarded, and have it running Amazon the same day. Now you have individuals that's having 2, 3, up to a month worth of wait once they submit everything for asset verification. So it's an in-depth check on the particular truck you're using. And it's been at least 2.5 years since I've used a rental. So just being 100% honest, I'm not sure of how you would onboard a rental truck, but I would definitely expect it to be a lengthier process than, if it was your personal truck. And even some individuals with their personal trucks are just having issues getting them onboarded with the asset verification. Box Truck Gang in the building. What's happening? Appreciate you. How long I've been on? 42 minutes right now, Box Truck Gang. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Hit the like button on your way in. 14 people in the building right now. And once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me on this afternoon stream. My last one went haywire, so I felt like I had to do another one of these. This one seems to be going pretty well. I just got to get out of here shortly. So, yeah, what I've kind of talked about is just the rates. Like I said, above average for peak season, $3 to $5 a mile, $8 to $1,200 a day. Most individuals were able to get at least $3,500 a week. Some individuals, I know my buddy out of Iowa that I, holler at from time to time, he said he was averaging like 47 a week. And he had some technicalities. Like I said, it was a bunch of technicalities. Inclement weather. I know a lot of individuals in his market over in Iowa, they jailed or the trucks froze up. So the weather was an issue. Bad suspensions. You also had the safety aspect where a lot of carriers were suspended. So yeah, it was a doozy, this year. But if it was one theme of peak season 2025, this was the peak season of technicalities. Most definitely. Like, this was the peak season of technicalities. It started with bitter cold weather. And I already told everybody how to manage these trucks in that type of weather. You just kind of got to go back in the content. But, if you have an understanding of diesel trucks, you could keep them from jailing. Just be, heavy on the anti-gel. That's my thing. Like, every time I could grab, a quart or a gallon of anti-gel, have it come, I grab one. I put it in the tank. Each time I fill up, I put it in the tank. You can't let these trucks sit for 2 or 3 days without starting them up in that cold weather. Airlines freeze. You got to check tire pressures. It's a bunch that comes with, managing these trucks in the cold weather. You're going to need to keep you some starter fluid if you do let the truck sit for a long period of time, or if you do end up, unfortunately, running out of fuel, which some individuals experience. It's a bunch to truck management in the cold as opposed to the heat. I've said this in the past as well. You could run a truck in 110 degrees and not have one issue. But in the cold weather, the truth about these trucks, it comes out. So, do with that what you will. But, I made plenty of content, a couple years on how to manage these trucks in extreme cold conditions because it's different. And usually the rates rise when the temperature drops. But at the same time, individuals, they can't get the truck started or the trucks are breaking down. So it's tricky because, you could be in a situation where you're looking at stellar rates, but, your truck in the shop was broke down. So, you want to try to avoid those situations if possible. But yeah, it was interesting to say the least. Like I said, to me, it was the peak season of technicalities. Chauncey, what's happening? What's happening? How much have you spent on maintenance since you been running EST? In general, or how long you talking about, Chauncey? What's the period of time? Luckily, lately, I'm gonna be honest with you, I have not had to spend. Hey, appreciate that super chat too, Chauncey. Appreciate you. Chauncey always chipping in. Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody for joining me. 12 people in the building right now. If you have not hit the like button, hit the like button for me one time. That would be greatly appreciated. I'm about on my way out of here. Like I said, I got an Amazon load book pending. It does not cancel. I need to stop saying that. But Yeah, I got an Amazon load coming up here shortly that I'm gonna go scoop up and run it down. Run it down. Where we at? I'm gonna go back up. But yeah, I want to make this one short and sweet. After situation with the last live, but I noticed during peak season, and I'm not even signed up. Amazon keeps trying to get me to sign up, but I noticed each year, right before peak, they start like pushing contracts. And I always admire the guys that, do contracts because they got to kind of be like psychic or something like that. Because as I stated, things get crazy with these trucks, in inclement, extreme cold conditions. And you got a 6-week contract booked up, that you have to be present for. And that ain't just one rejection. If you got a 6-week contract, your truck go down, you got 2 weeks of maintenance. Essentially, you may have to reject that entire contract. And we all know, as I'm speaking on right now, Amazon really ain't that forgiving. So you could get in a sticky situation. That's why I say I always admire the guys that book those contracts. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. In general, woo, how much I done spent on maintenance in general. Like when I first got the truck, Penske sold. I ain't gonna even get into that. Penske gonna be on this live. Penske, they tried to play me. Long story short. So when they gave me the truck, it was some issues. They act like they fixed it, but they didn't. And I had to turn around, go behind them and actually fix it. So, man, if you say in general, probably a dub, maybe a 20 ball. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Probably 20 since I had it, 2.5 years or so. Yeah. Maintenance get expensive. And you could get those warranties that come with these trucks, but just being 100% honest with you, they really ain't worth your time. They're going to deny all claims for most of the maintenance that you need done. I had a transmission issue. It was an internal harness inside the trans. They told me, the maintenance company that I had the maintenance plan with, that they did not cover that. An internal harness, inside the trans. So, you could have these warranties, but it's really just something that they set up to get you out of an extra 5-10 grand. Just being 100% honest with you. If I was buying a truck, I definitely skip the truck warranty and just kind of put up some money for maintenance and, what may occur in the future. Because, it's crazy how they do a lot of carriers, new carriers, without a whole lot of capital. That's a lot of what comes into play. See, he got the numbers. There you go. Y'all want numbers. 2,700. See, FTS be out here running too. He run pretty hard. So what are you still doing those contracts, FTS? If you don't mind me asking, before I get out of here, I'm about to make my exit. We right up under an hour, right where I wanted to be. I think it was a good live. I got more to talk about, but not a lot of time. So, I'm kind of trying to free up some time. That way I could do, I still like doing these lives and just making content in general. I just want it to be quality first and foremost. That's why I took the last one down due to that portrait landscape situation. If you're here right now, by the way, hit the like button if you have not done so. You catch this on the replay, hit the like button there as well. But yeah, I just want it to be quality, good information. And they ain't got to be super long. I just want them to be kind of straightforward. And once again, just very informational. That's what I shoot for. But yeah, these trucks in general could get expensive. Chauncey was asking what I spent over the lifetime of me having a truck, and yeah, it'd be kind of crazy. So that's that. But yeah, this peak season was the peak season of technicalities and just pertaining to, getting into Amazon, because that was kind of what I wanted to touch on, within the last year. And we could run through these real quick just to give you guys a better idea, of what we kind of been facing. Because yeah, Amazon has steadily, you know, implemented different circumstances, in my opinion, just to kind of clean house and, move around some carriers, but initially we all know we saw the equipment verification, where you have to verify the trucks. It's no longer you could just put the plate number into the system and, run that truck. They want insurance, plate number, registration, and so forth. So they want to verify that the truck is yours in order to curb the double brokering, kind of different things that was going on with Amazon accounts. But we also had background checks. Initially that was for onboarding drivers. It moved to all drivers that do not hold a CDL. So if you have a CDL, technically pertaining to the background checks, Amazon saying you should not have to complete one if you have a CDL. If you don't have a CDL, you must complete a background check, whether you've been with Amazon or you're on board. And they're going to reach out and let the carriers know when the background check should occur. They never specify exactly what they're looking for or anything of that nature. It's just that they're doing background checks. So I don't know what excludes a driver or anything like that. They also discontinued temp badges. So you used to be able to bring your girl, your kid, a driver, a trainee, and have them get a badge, and they could immediately go into the facility with you and pick up a load. That's been discontinued. So it's no longer temp badges provided for individuals that are not currently onboarded with Amazon. They also made changes to the onboarding process. It's a lot lengthier, more information required. You have to have a active driver's license. It was a time where you didn't even need a driver's license to onboard with Amazon. That's since been changed. Also I kind of talked about device tracking, where you have a primary, a secondary device. Amazon's tracking which device you're using and so forth. Once again, to kind of curb double brokering. They also got automated check-ins. So with the automated check-ins, you can't just go into the facility, talk to the guard, get in. It's automated. So you have to go to the proper credentials. If you don't have an Amazon Relay app for the particular load that you're running, it's no entry. From what I hear, you could drop a trailer if you have an Amazon trailer due to that being their property. But if you're picking up a load, that load will subsequently be rejected. So you got to have the proper credentials, apps, drivers, truck verifications, and things of that nature in order to gain entry. And the next one, I'm kind of talking about it right now, but the app is required. I've seen an individual way back when get an Amazon trailer rejected. They sent the trailer back out with him because he didn't have an app. How I noticed, because I was behind him when he pulled out. When I pulled to the automated screen, it said app required, exit yard. So, it's no beating, the system and passing a load off or switching apps thing. No, that's a thing of the past. Also, photo recognition, which could get tricky because you get 3 attempts, 3 fails, just kind of leave you in disarray. I don't know exactly what the situation is, but I failed twice. Luckily, I haven't failed it 3 times because I heard, like, once again, that could just be a really sticky situation. They also discontinued the 1 minute policy. It used to be a 1 minute policy where if you show up within 1 minute, say the load pick up at 1:30 a.m., you show up by 1:31, that wasn't a penalty. Well, that's been discontinued, and you're penalized the second after your pickup time. So if it's 1:30, at 1:31, you're late and you will be penalized. And they also like escalating situations for low performance scores and supervising Amazon Relay account. So once that performance score drops so low, you end up somewhat on like the driver's license situation where you're on like a supervision and they watch you to see if you get that performance score back up. Otherwise, you may be removed from the load board. We got auto rejections, which is something else that's come up in the last year. So if you don't assign a driver to a load within, I believe, 2 hours of that load running, you know, it's a short period of time, that load can subsequently be rejected with or without reason. You used to could get away, shuffle drivers, things of that nature. Not only is the drivers that are assigned to the loads being tracked, but once again, if you don't have a driver assigned to the load within 2 hours of the pickup, it could be rejected. It's going to be extremely hard to get that overturned or disputed. A lot of the 3PLs, Amazon constantly onboards different 3PLs that they move freight for. Signatures, pictures, BOLs. I got a call from an Amazon ROC personnel just 2 days ago about a BOL out of the facility that I'm picking up from today, and they don't provide a BOL. So, you know, I've explained to them, they said this is a third party to a third party. You know, they're shipping something for somebody that you're shipping for. So they don't have a BOL. So they wanted pictures. They send me an email, you know. They just paying a lot more attention to what's going on. It's also recent changes to the dispute process, you know, and I believe you have 2 weeks max. It used to be 30 days. You got 2 weeks to dispute a pay or a time performance discrepancy. After that 2 weeks, you know, the dispute process is unavailable. Also, we got a lot of no score situations. I just want to run through a bunch of these to just give you the gist of what you're facing. If you're onboarded, if you're new, if you're intending to onboard, whatever the case may be. But yeah, all of this is stuff to look out for. I see 15 people, a lot of great information that's not been put out. Do me a favor, hit the like button. While you at it, subscribe to the channel. But yeah, it's a lot of no score situations for individuals that have not ran an Amazon Relay load within the last, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks. It depends. It's a percentage ratio. So it depends how many loads you've ran in the past as opposed to whatever your score is and how long you don't run. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the situation. Most of the people that know, they know. And in those situations, after a couple weeks of not running Amazon, you end up with no score. And it's similar to having a bad score. You have to work your way out of that situation by running a certain amount of loads successfully for a certain number of weeks. Yeah, all of this stuff kind of gets tricky. Also, lastly is safety score metrics. You know, pretty much now Amazon is working closely with the FMCSA. From what I'm getting, one out of service violation could boot you from the load board for a lengthy period of time, if not permanently. I know individuals that went out for safety score FMCSA out of service issues, and that time passed where they should be able to get back in, but they have not been able to do so. So that's something to think about as well. Just make sure when you out here, your drivers out here, you operating safely. I don't know if it's something going on with the FMCSA right now. I know I've seen a bunch of inspections in the last couple days, semis, box trucks pulled in the weigh scales, just a bunch going on. So if you out here in operation, little piece of advice from me to you is to just be careful. If you got drivers in the trucks, advise them to be careful as well, because one of these little small situations could turn into a big one, which in turn can end up having your company suspended from the Amazon Relay Load Board. Like I said, they're closely monitoring interactions between carriers and the FMCSA. So you don't want to end up in a bind, pertaining to safety. Get a final mile contract. I've been seeing a lot of those different furniture, appliance stuff, and seem like they paying a little money. But yeah, I've been seeing them popping up on Indeed. So yeah, that's something to think about as well. But yeah, I appreciate everybody for joining me today. This one was short and sweet, right over an hour, maybe a little bit longer than I want it to be, but ultimately very informational. Like I said, I want to focus on, good, solid information. That's how I want to move through this. But yeah, I appreciate everybody for joining me on this Friday afternoon. Like I said, I got some work to get into. It's been kind of a busy day for me, but yeah, it's always good to kind of touch bases with everybody and just kind of, go over everything that's kind of changing with Amazon Relay. We all know Amazon is just constantly, changing. I'm sure it's a bunch that's going to switch up this year as well. So kind of just got to go with the flow if you running with Amazon. Shout out to all my veterans. It was a guy that I remember him from the Beloit, Wisconsin days. If anybody remember Beloit, Wisconsin, that was a while ago. Beloit at times, yeah, it could be a shit show. Excuse my French, but there was a lot of money to be made out of there, and just a time to be had. But I remember one of the guys from there, and just recently, a few days ago, I had some skids that weren't the actual width of the pallet. Anybody that run freight knows with those type of skids, when they not the full width of the pallet, it's hard to brace them against each other to keep them from falling. So you could strap them, but unless you strap them in a square, it's hard to brace them. And I had two fall over, and I'm always the guy to like, nah, I'm good, I got it. He kept peeking in the truck. He like, bro, you good? I'm like, oh, I got it. It happened. Hey, man, I'll be running them too. He kept looking. He wouldn't let me leave without helping me. And one of the skids that fell over, shout out to him. We shot it across the shop floor, and that's what I was dropping in Crest Hill. But he held it, I pushed it, and we both just ran across the floor. The check-in ship clerk was looking like, they kind of wanted us to load it into a bin, but man, it would have took me an extra at least 45 minutes. So he came through in the clutch, much appreciated. Shout out to him. But yeah, back in the day, Beloit, Wisconsin was, plentiful. And like I say, just shout out to all of the veterans that still running Amazon, in this day and age. Let me see. Yeah, we need to wrap FTS. I didn't step my game up. I kind of educated myself on some things. We'll talk behind the scenes, but I picked up some new skills in the last few months. It was something I talked about in the past, and it just came into fruition. And yeah, you kind of just doing different work, educating myself, stepping on my skill set. That way, I don't go into anything blind. But yeah, we definitely need to wrap. I got to get in your area here shortly anyway, FTS. I got some business to take care of up that way. But yeah, I got your email. So yeah, we'll definitely wrap, because that's the name of the game right now, is to diversify. Definitely. We got to get into some different things. I recently got a TWIC card. I ain't got a whole lot of time, but yeah, I got my TWIC card. I've always had the hazmat CDL, but you gotta constantly keep adding different things into your repertoire in order to, be successful out here. The game is ever changing. And if you can't, like FTS said, diversify and move into different things, but in a educated mindset, because you don't want to go in blind. You make a bunch of mistakes, you end up, you know, just wasting a bunch of time, and that's something that I've always been kind of cognizant of and just try to be careful with. But you got to stay educating yourself. You got to stay learning. You got to stay up in that skill set and the different certifications. Not only can a TWIC card get you airport loads, different loads that's, not obtainable to most carriers, but it could save you a lot of stress at the airports as well. If you flying, traveling, whatever the case may be. So that's just something to think about. I see 10 people right now. If you're here right now and you have not done so, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment in the chat. And if you catch this on the replay, do so there as well. And on that note, I think I'm going to end this thing, get out here and get to work. You got two decisions. Either you're going to make some money or you're going to make some money. What you going to do? That's my mindset. Pick one. And on that note, I appreciate everybody for joining me. It's been a great live stream. Hit the like button on the way out. Catch y'all in the next one. Peace.